2024 has been a surprisingly good year for music. And I feel like you could say that about every year, but this year has continually ramped up quality in new albums coming out as it went along. Seeing so many trends unexpectedly gain mainstream attention, it's quite startling. New stars falling, new stars rising, and an all-around fantastic year for music, regardless of what you're into. So today, I'm gonna list off my favorite albums from this year. Seeing as I'm quite an avid listener of music and try to listen to everything that piques my interest, tinnitus be damned. Here are my top 20 albums of 2024. To start this list off, I thought I'd give a band whose triumphant return to form is something that I've welcomed and have eagerly awaited. That band being Opeth with their latest album, The Last Will and Testament. It's an album that sees them prove that they still have their signature progressive metal sound, that they do just so well. It's punchy, hard-hitting, and full of complex riffs. The stuff that makes Opeth such a great band. The vocals are a mixture of anthemic highs and growling lows that help characterize each song. Honestly, I'm kind of a sucker for this type of progressive metal. It strikes a balance between the brainy rock jams and the visceral technical death metal, in which it takes the best from both worlds. Opeth's ability to do so has led them to have such a brilliant run in their career from the 90s into the 2000s. However, since the release of Watershed, Opeth has been leaning more into the progressive rock component of their music, completely abandoning the pummeling intensity of their death metal days, with each of their albums they put out in the 2010s essentially being a gushing love letter to those golden years of prog rock in the 70s, which was fine, but rarely offered anything new. I mean, at least they weren't lost in overly convoluted high concepts like some prog metal bands. Dream Theater. Thankfully, this album brings them back to a sound that fits them best. It allows them to work in progressive elements and incorporate various symphonic instruments, but does so in a way that ensures the intensity is propelled forward. This makes The Last Will and Testament one of the most effective progressive metal albums I've heard this decade, which gives me a lot of hope for Opeth records in the future. Keep it up, boys. What the fuck? Am I becoming a normie? Or is just Zach Bryan just that fucking good? Recently, there's been a resurgence of country music in the mainstream culture, especially this year, when artists like Morgan Wallen, Noah Kahan, and most impressive of them all, Zach Bryan, have exploded on the Billboard charts in America, making more stripped back and simplistic country music that abides by pop sensibilities. Yet of those three I mentioned, I described Zach Bryan as the most impressive because of how intimate his skills are as a songwriter. And that hit an apex for me in his album, The Great American Bar Scene. His unique storytelling on this album strikes at the heart and paints a very personal and intimate view of his stories. He adds interesting day-to-day elements in these stories while permitting the emotions felt by them to seep through. Yet at the same time, his style of songwriting permits him to add memorable choruses. And even features. This album has some great features on it, especially his songs with John Mayer and Bruce Springsteen being the standouts, which are duets that allow them both to shine. This album also manifests in him embracing rootsier styles of rock and folk music, building up these songs with bluesy electric guitars and somber violins, but still maintaining that authenticity to it. A kind of authenticity that you could not find in any other pop artist today. I'm not even a huge fan of country music. Just Zach Bryan has taken the stylings of it and just done so much with it. He's presented himself as one of the best singer-songwriters in mainstream music. Country or not, Zach Bryan is undeniably a songwriting talent of our generation, and this album, The Great American Bar Scene, is proof of it. Big Thief's recent surge in popularity is a surprise to no one who's been following them. Their unique indie folk rock and distinct vocal style and songwriting that compares to no one else right now. So it's even less of a surprise when one of Big Thief's lead singers, Adrian Lenker, decides to make a solo effort that it is anything less than great. Bright Future simplifies Big Thief's already simple folk rock sound to an entirely acoustic singer-songwriter album, one full of Adrian's signature vocals and lyrics that embrace their eccentricities and underlying emotion. Her voice has a unique frailty to it that no other songwriter has, which helps accentuate her style further. The production is intimate and allows for focus on her vocals. It's very minimalistic, which allows for the songs to kind of live and breathe. The stories often take some childlike wonder, embracing nostalgia lovingly and romantically. It's really good and makes an excellent case for her as a solo artist, away from Big Thief. She really crafts some distinct songs under her solo project, even when working with some of the songs that Big Thief has also recorded, like Vampire Empire. Bright Future is intimate and uniquely rejuvenating, and is one of the best indie folk albums I've heard this year. I'm also glad I got to see her live, even if I did feel a little, incredible out of place. Like, seriously, her audience consisted mainly of, like, Taylor Swift fans who will only get their coffee from countries whose world leaders' star signs align with theirs. But damn, if that show wasn't good. I'd be telling straight lies if it was anything less than spectacular. Any band that makes Jimmy Kimmel and his audience cry is a good band in my book. Yes, I'm talking about Knocked Loose, one of the biggest metallic hardcore bands out right now, and their latest album, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To, which is one of the few albums that I could describe as a punch to the face and have that be a good thing. While they may have been dogged on for some of their rather corny breakdown callouts on previous songs, this album shows that they have all the bite to back up their barking. It's an ultra-aggressive take on the band's sound that does not let up for a moment. It's crushing, unrelenting, and an all-around adrenaline rush. It doesn't even matter how short the album is, because by far it's the shortest album on this list. It just packs so much energy and aggression into that 28-minute package. It's incredible. And it somehow even manages to get some great features in there, from the likes of Poppy on the song Suffocate. This album has led me to become a fan of the metalcore genre. Knocked Loose made something insanely heavy, punishing, and intense. Even for a genre like metalcore, this is on a whole nother level. You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To is another great example of metalcore at its best and most brutal. And I don't think I'll hear an album with that level of intensity anytime soon. At number 16, I have a tie between two albums by the same artist, seeing as I can't really decide which one's better, and also because I'm the maker of the list, I'm the driver of this buggy, so fuck it. It's The Smile's Cutouts and Wall of Eyes. The Smile as a band has been a perfect getaway for some of the members of Radiohead to step away from the box that the Radiohead name has put on them. Like, seriously, in the modern day, a Radiohead release at this point has expectations of being highly innovative and a unique experience, and has probably led to the members having some unsurmountable pressure put on them by most of their fan base. So along comes The Smile, which contains some of the members, makes it feel like an attempt to sidestep that pressure to focus on music that is just for them, that they actually enjoy playing and making. Both albums are full of angular rock song, psychedelic suspense, and tracks full of abstract atmospheres. Everyone on here is at peak form. From Tom, who is shooting his voice into his eccentric highs and reaching down into the mellow lows, and same with Johnny Greenwood, who's got incredible guitar work on this album. Tom Skinner maintaining some tight drum sections throughout the albums. Both Cutouts and The Wall of Eyes still have a good variety, even though some people may not be a fan of their slower material on these records. It still shows that all these guys that were in Radiohead still have it, and it may not be for all Radiohead fans, but the material on display here shows that these guys are more than just Radiohead. Metal often plays into fantasy elements to give off the feeling of grand, powerful adventures, utilizing material from fantasy, folklore, and even science fiction to display acceleration and excitement and to get your blood pumping. But obviously, fantasy is a fantasy. The consequences of setting on a space voyage into the unknown can be fucking terrifying, and no one displays that terror better than Finnish metal band Ornasi Pazuzu. I probably mispronounced that. And their album... Oh my god. This album touches into the realm of cosmic horror with its overwhelming synths and mechanical drums that are topped off with vocal deliveries that are intense and have this harsh growl. To make it even better, under the venomous vocals, it has electronics delving into this murky atmosphere that lingers and just gets under your skin. Ugh. The lyrics play into this as well, at least what I could figure out. Even with their cryptic nature, they capture the terror heard in each song's sonic landscape. Yet at the same time, it's got this psychedelic rock leaning to it that somehow pairs perfectly with the black metal elements. It's an album that is monstrous, psychedelic, and horrifying. No other band right now sounds like Ornasi Pazuzu. It feels refreshing to see a band break the conventions of sci-fi themed metal being all, fuck it, we wage an intergalactic war in this bitch, to being more realistic like, oh dear god, what is this thing? So clearly, on this album, they created and filled a niche within the metal sphere, and no one does it better than these guys. Of all the albums on this list, this one was the one I expected the least, but apparently wanted the most. Beth Gibbons, Portishead lead singer, returns after decades of silence with her album Lives Outgrown, a grand folk album that lends her unique voice to a collection of songs that are expansive and lush. It's interesting to hear her with this style, considering her work with the legendary trip-hop group Portishead. But her voice is so incredible and has such a range that this album is just no surprise. Even with her previous album, 22 years ago, which you should definitely check out, it's still a surprise to hear it on this album. Both utilize more organic instrumentation than a Portishead album, and as much as I love the musings of trip-hop, the folk work here on Lives Outgrown seems to work so well with her voice, which has such a great emotional intensity that works even in these more simplistic sounds. Despite its simplicity, Lives Outgrown delves into so many different sounds that work well with Beth Gibbons' voice. From the raucous rock to the whimsical folk, there's so much on display here in terms of style and instruments used. I don't know what else to say. For a lack of better words, it's just incredible. Have you ever wondered what a 3 6 Mafia album would sound like if Michael Giro was one of the producers on it? No? Well, look no further than Kim Gordon's The Collective, an album poised full of odd electronics and harsh industrial guitar playing that serves as a backdrop to Kim's monotone spoken word delivery, which is delivering these abstract observations on life in the current day. A strange combination for sure, but it works. The electronics and drumming almost make this album feel like a hip-hop album. Maybe it is a hip-hop album, I don't know. It's kind of hard to define it, yet they feel so well placed on every single track, moving it forward and adding this menacing tone to the whole thing. Also, gotta say that I saw her live and that these parts went insane. Same with the guitar playing, which is also unrelenting. Hearing this album live really made my brain feel like I was being melted by a 5G signal or whatever the fuck is going on in this meme. And the album version of it just goes equally insane as well. And still, her vocals there, which are pretty flat in comparison to everything else in this album, kind of add an extra element of menace to the whole project. Really making the lyrics on this album, which may feel like mundane descriptions, take on a whole different meaning. Making it feel as if I was caught in a modern malaise, especially for the affluent LA type, which this might be taking aim at. Taking on things like social media, vanity, and consumerism. Things that are inspired by this book that I've been meaning to read, or the prequel that I've also been meaning to read. In a way, the collective style tackles those themes perfectly and fits them just right. I mean, the guitars just feel like a head rush, and same with the trap-like electronic elements, which feel like the things that are causing the head rush. The Collective is just an incredibly unique record, and it's kind of hard to pin down in words its qualities, because the qualities are so unique. It made for a great listening experience nonetheless. The modern era of death metal has been one where power and the ability to pummel your ears into submission are valued above all else. This way, the mosh pits will be unending and have their chaotic violence given a soundtrack. However, some bands like Blood Incantations try to build structure in their chaos, and nothing exhibits their ability to do so than their album Absolute Elsewhere. This album gives their signature death metal sound a framework built around two songs, The Message and The Stargate, which are broken up into 3 parts each. With them, Blood Incantation is able to create a vast voyage into the depths of space. It mixes prog rock riffs with old school electronics in a way that mixes in the new school of death metal so perfectly. It's kind of like the Ornasti Pazuzu album, except instead of embracing the horror, it embraces the feeling of exploring depths, incorporating those death metal elements effortlessly and making it feel grand. And as much as I love a good Opeth album, this one takes the cake for my favorite kind of progressive death metal. For God's sake, they even got Tangerine Dream on the album. What more could you want? I think at this point, bands like The Cure need no introduction. Their influence over goth and alternative rock is so vast, there isn't much else to say. Their legacy is huge, so when they decided to reintroduce themselves into the modern music landscape with their latest album, Songs of a Lost World, 16 years after their last album, they showed that how their legacy will continue beyond them. Songs of a Lost World feels like a grand tragic finale, one that feels entirely deserved and embraces the life that the band has had and everything they've made. You can hear it in the music. It's full of their swooning, hopeless romance, but now is taken on a melancholic and nostalgic quality. Maybe the tragedy is in the lyrics, which see Robert Smith facing his past and his old age with dignity, wearing his regrets on his sleeve while acknowledging the futility of it all in a world of constant change. It tackles some complicated emotional subjects, and so the slower moving instrumentals and longer songs feel fitting here. In a way, it feels like the instruments they've used over the years have become haunted and carry the weight of time with how much heavier this album is. It's some of the best material The Cure has made in decades, and serves as a perfect reminder of who is the king of goth rock. It's obviously tackling some serious stuff here that Robert Smith has been dealing with as he's been getting older, but it isn't completely downtrodden. Songs of a Lost World feels like it's lost but not hopeless, bleak but not dreary, and most importantly, down but not out. Well, this is an artist I never thought would be here. Portis Robinson, a huge name in the EDM festival scene, decides he wants to subvert his style and infuse it with bright pop punk to make some of the catchiest songs I've heard all year round. Those songs come together and form the album Smile, an album so bright and sugary sounding, it makes any depressive spell wither away. Smile's attempt to mix in the pop mentality in with the EDM electronics is just incredible. With songs that could be traditionally done with more guitars are given a huge sound that culminate in a powerful experience, especially on songs like the lead single, Cheerleader. Yet it also still works in guitars into the mix, something that works incredibly well throughout the album as it playfully mixes with the electronics to create amazing payoffs. Lyrically, however, this album is a bit bittersweet, delving into relationship issues in the internet age and online culture, referencing things like Pinterest, YouTube videos, and music reviews, all of which reflect his mental state and him trying to push through the sadness, trying to fight for a brighter day and make the most of it. And so this comes together in the album's insistence on pushing for an optimistic view, and you can certainly hear it in the music. Smile is an interesting album, and I'm glad Porter Robinson went in this direction. While his EDM stuff never really impressed me, this album brings his style to life, and whenever I listen to it, it puts a huge smile on my face. No pun intended. Although, I never thought I'd get close to liking anything related to League of Legends. But here we are.
The problem is
The rave scene of the 2000s was enigmatic, so much so that we are now seeing endless copycats latching on to its style as it's regaining popularity with the newer generation, leading to some good music that is heavily inspired by that era and also the Dare. Then some artists decided to do the same thing, but take it in an entirely new direction. And that's how we got The Help, and their long-awaited self-titled debut, The Help. In their debut, they carry on the abrasive, dance-inducing synths and the nostalgic feeling you get from them, doing the same stuff that you could hear on their breakout songs like SSX and California Dream Girl, which elevates their songs above the rest with their boisterous rock guitars and catchy vocals, making it feel entirely divorced from whatever they were inspired by. What also makes them stand out is the use of glitchy electronic sampling. Things like the vocals kind of get lost in the mix and just feel like another thing thrown into the rave hype. This album just genuinely feels like a non-stop dance party from start to finish. So it's clear to me that The Help have managed to carve out a unique sound for themselves, and this album proves it. Without a shadow of a doubt, they were not just another band inspired by the indie sleaze era, but are doing their own thing entirely. Unlike some bands. I'm looking at you, The Dare. Only in Middle America could something like Chat Pile exist, teaming their anxiety, rage, and despair into a cacophonous sludge of sounds that form their body of work, with the latest, Cool World, being an excellent showcase of what they do best. Cool World is full of chugging, distorted metal guitars, and angular riffs lie underneath it, in a way that portrays the conflicting motions that run through their music. This creates an interesting dynamic in which the songs are built up with these jagged riffs, allowing them to swell up with tension. The guitar lines almost have this post-punk feel to them, with how downtrodden and frantic they sound. Same goes for the drums, which have this tight, punchy rhythm that post-punk music has, that then pays off in these ultra-heavy breakdowns. All of which is delivered with this howling fury of frontman Raygun Bush that's just insane to hear. It's brutal. Same goes for the lyrics, conveying the brutality and dread of the world, doing so in a perspective bathed in self-deprecation and self-minimization. Also, just because I'm a movie dork, there are tons of references to movies that they incorporate so well here, and in their live work where they just talk about shit in between songs, like on Frownland, which is not an ode to the Captain Beefheart song, but is an actual direct reference, and lyrically is a reference to Roland Brownstein's film of the same name, creating a parallel between that song's lyrics and the movie's dealing with its main character's social outcast. I only bring that up because I really like that movie, and I really like how the song touches on it. Good job. Cool World is one of the heaviest albums I've heard all year, and I love it for that. Its use of post-punk elements in their signature sludge metal sound is something that I've adored about these guys. But this album just brings it to a whole new dimension. It kind of feels like if Korn and Big Black were to make an album together about inner turmoil and urban decay in the Midwest, or if someone was to turn the game Twisted Metal into an album, it would sound something like this. It's just insane. It's a shoo-shoo album. What else could you say about it? What else could I say about it? I don't know. 13-inch Frank Beltram Italian... Oh my god. 13-inch Frank Beltram Italian Stiletto with bison horn grips. What a fucking title. Is an album that sees the band at their glitziest and most maximal. It's a noisy, manic fever dream that's as catchy as it is delirious. Even though I've been a long-time Shoo Shoo fan, which very few people should be, I feel like anytime I try to describe this band's appeal, I never get close to it. Their music is kind of in a league of its own. It's a style, just like this album's style, is so all over the place. For this entry, trying to introduce them, it's kind of impossible. I know I've described a lot of bands on this list as weird or strange or odd, but this one kind of takes the cake. Fuck it takes the whole bakery for that matter. 13-inch Frank Beltram is all over the place, with songs that are hauntingly beautiful and have arrangements and hushed vocals like the opening track, Ari Omni. Then it's got noisy pop bangers that just go crazy, like Common Loon. Jamie Stewart, as per usual, does so much on this album sonically. that it's incredible, even by Shushu standards. The lyrics are also cryptic in typical Shushu fashion, yet they don't feel out of place in the sugar-coated sound they have on this album. It's very akin to their earlier work like Fabulous Muscles or La Forte. If you are a fan of Shushu, then this album is perfect for you, and maybe is a good entry point into the band? I don't know. This album is definitely not for everyone, but hey, this album is for me at least. Ah yes, we are reaching some real edgelord shit here. Foxing's self-titled album sees the Midwest emo group leave their Midwestern roots behind in the rearview, now just becoming an indie emo band, one with influences clearly worn on their sleeves and are all over the place. It plays with these angsty styles to great success, switching between various elements with ease. Tracks can range from high-flying screamo to slow, moody, atmospheric tracks with great payoffs. Okay, I'm literally just talking about Greyhound on that last part. That song is fucking, like, holy shit, it's good. They also handle songs with more direct indie sensibilities, like the song Barking, which I swear sounds exactly like an Arcade Fire song. Just from all of what I've described, you can tell that their vocalist is putting in some work on this album, and it's incredible to see his range just be put on display here. And the production is able to keep up with all these changes, and even greatly exemplify them, enhancing the atmosphere with a unique dread that even delves into the realm of experimental music, like on some of the later tracks like Dead Internet or Dead Cat, one which allows the aggressive rock to punch through it all. It's needless to say that on each of the songs here, you can kind of hear where they pick and grab influences from, but it still kind of comes together in a cohesive experience. Foxing's self-titled album has so many of its own unique qualities that its influences are heard but are not parroted or copied directly, and it still somehow feels cohesive to me as an album. Maybe it's just the overarching depressing tone this album has. It kind of checks all the boxes for the stuff that appeals to me, a depressed 20-something, and unsurprisingly, as much as I love this album, there's a positive correlation between its release and the onset of my seasonal depression this year. So if that sells it for you, be my guest, get lost in your inner angst. Have fun! Ow, damn, that's loud. Ah yes, Parannoul is back again, returning to my list after his triumphant 2023 album, After the Magic, to plunge headfirst on this new album into the pits of noise, which culminates in Sky 100. Parannoul kind of realizing the potential of noise after his live album that he also released last year called After the Night, that ended in a 40-minute noisy jam track that was absolutely one of the best things he's recorded to this day. So of course the next step he would take would be to follow that up with Sky 100, his loudest album to date. It's a great showcase of Parannoul's brand of shoegaze. It's full of dreamy whimsy, of nostalgia, but this time with an abrasive edge. Thankfully, his leaning in the noisy aspect paid off and adds so much to his sound, with each of the rock components being packed full of as much noise as possible. And I do mean full. The guitars here feel overwhelming in the best way possible. In his lyrics, you kind of hear him progress as a person as well. Parannoul kind of continuing valiantly in his crusade of self-discovery from his last album, embracing the nostalgia while pushing through the pain of moving forward. In that pain, the noisy production manifests as an abrasive buffer to Parannoul's optimistic outlook. The lyrical conflict on display, or at least according to the translation, plays into the sonic one perfectly. I especially love how explosive the drums sound on this project. It feels like they're bursting to the forefront in a spectacular fashion of every single song they're on. Sky 100 continues to further the case, at least for me, for why Parannoul deserves to be the frontrunner in the internet discussion of international shoegaze. No question about it. How many times can one band reinvent the wheel in their career? How many times do you really need to do that? Is there a middle ground between the constant need to reinvent yourself and staying with what's familiar to you as a band? Well, on Only God Was Above Us, Vampire Weekend tries to find that middle ground, taking their trademark style in new directions so far beyond their breakout debut in 2008. The indie legends do it again, with another classic album, seeing their bright indie pop shine even brighter under more bombastic production. The album pieces together their old song style to form something that is entirely new. And I do mean that literally. It's like songs on here, at least from what I could catch, take some of the melodies and kind of rearrange them and rework them in new ways on these songs. It's kind of done in this celebratory fashion of their music, of their life, and everything they've kind of accomplished. It's done in this piecemeal way, making each song feel entirely unique and fresh. To me, I've always been a fan of their style, and this is them doing that in the best way possible. The added noise, it is kind of abrasive, makes it feel more lively and energetic than they've ever been since their debut. I mean, I'm not gonna say that they're the greatest band on earth, but I love their unique trademark bright indie pop. I mean, I'm even a fan of Father the Bride, but this album, oh my god, this album, Only a God Was Above Us, is just so full of life, and even insights on their life, on their art, being ultra positive in a way that I didn't even think was possible. It's jam-packed with great songs, great production, and I could not recommend it enough. Honestly, I'm kind of heartbroken putting this at number 4 on my list, but man, the 3 above this are just so incredible. Only God Was Above Us is a perfect case on why you don't need to reinvent the wheel in everything you do. Wow, to describe this album in a few words is damn near impossible. Magdalena Bay's Imaginal Disc is a dazzling indie pop album that just puts all others to shame. Its production is immaculate and detailed with every turn it takes, all sung with vocals that are just equally as immaculate. This album sees the duo's unique dancey synth pop go into bolder directions than they've ever gone. I mean, the production alone has evolved so much, and thus the duo has done the same as well. Magdalena Bay is on full force here. Their production has such range and depth to it, from a dancey indie pop jam to an all-out psychedelic rock fest with such ease that it feels like a natural progression of the album's overarching narrative. It incorporates so many indie styles. It's outright impressive the way that it works them in, especially those hazy synths that you might hear on a George Clinton song, on songs like Image, or the thick bass lines of Killing Time. There's just so much to unpack in that department that it's hard to do in just a small amount of words. It's definitely an interesting concept album that tackles a lot of issues regarding identity and finding yourself in a digital world swamped with a plethora of identities to attach to. It's about death, it's about romance, it's about reinvention, and just so much more, all delivered in such a serene vocal delivery that it's utterly captivating to listen to on this album. Micah Tenenbaum's delivery on every single song has such an intimacy to it that it's as if she had me wrapped around her finger the whole fucking time. Look, I'm not an optimist at all, and I'm certainly not a poptimist either. I was not as huge as everyone else into the whole Brat Summer thing, and I didn't really give a singular shit about whatever indie artist Taylor Swift was trying to copy right now. But this album is where it's at. This is pop music at its finest. I know I'm a grown man at this point, and this album is some absolute white girl shit, but man, I kneel. It's so fucking good. So I implore you, please listen to it. Are you unattractive to women? So much so that it made you desperate enough to try and hit your skull with rocks in the hopes of reshaping your skull and take dating advice from a man who's been arrested for sex trafficking? Well, then this album's about you! Yes, it's the new sound by former Black Midi frontman Jordy Grep, making his debut record after Black Midi's breakup, a concept album portraying the plight of modern men that I guess some would deem as incels, or at least tackling that whole idea of incels in a timeless and literary manner, evoking a lot of the lounge singer charisma, but doing it with the additional sleaze, while also still incorporating his signature fast-paced jagged guitar playing with salsa, bossa nova, and vocal jazz. This album kind of feels like a fusion between Donald Fagen and Frank Zappa in terms of its style, as well as its sense of humor. Yes, this album takes on the whole subject of this type of man that I mentioned before, in a unique exploration. I did phrase the storytelling that it was being told in the lens of an incel, but it speaks more broadly to a certain type of man, one that has been persistent throughout time. The fake confident type, the one that wants to be all that, but never is. It's perfectly described in the opening track that describes his forced confidence. This person is then set up in that song and then thrown into countless unique situations that are oftentimes absurd and vulgar, yet allowing you to chuckle at their humorous slant. The New Sound is one of the most lyrically interesting albums I've heard in a long time. It has such unique storytelling that makes you feel like you are the protagonist of the songs, trapped in this mindset that you are this great alpha male, and describing the depths you go to try and prove it. It's an amazing album to listen to, along with the lyrics in mind, because the lyrics can be quite intense, while still having this reward of its humorous tale. All that being said though, if this album isn't the greatest album lyrically, or even sonically, then what is? Oh yeah, here are my honorable mentions. Everything Everything, Mountainhead. Unix, Harbor Sentry. Nala Cinefro, Endless. Cassandra Jenkins, My Light, My Destroyer. Spectral Wound, Songs of Blood and Mire. Meaningful Stone, Angel Interview. Prostitute, Attempted Martyr. Maruha, The Vault. Joey Valence and Bray, No Hands. Hoplitz, Paramane Mani. Tapir, The Pilgrim, Their God. The King of My Decrepit Mountain. Euboa, Impossible Light. Ulcerate, Cutting the Throat of God. Julia Holter, Something in the Room She Moves. This is the Glass House. 867. And finally, State Fault's Children of the Moon. Yes, my favorite album from 2024 is Mount Erie's Night Palace, the latest stop in Phil Elverum's transcendental Zen exploration of his life, transposing his life stories into a reflective lens with the natural world surrounding him being a huge character in it, played through Phil Elverum's signature folk rock style that expands to incorporate a large variety of sound, like droning guitars, buzzing modulators, and even some straightforward folk rock, or even stuff that's just outright experimental and noisy. Yet somehow, amidst the album's chaos, it still has this tranquil tone overall. It's beautiful to listen to. He does so much in an 80-minute runtime. It has 26 songs on it, and each one feels so distinct. They feel so distinct because they take on different parts of life, making even insignificant things he talks about lead to great contemplation. I mean, there's a song on this album about an empty paper towel roll that he gets so much out of. You think I could fucking do that? Yeah, fucking right. Just look at this thing. That song alone says so much about him, his world building, and how he portrays it with instrumentation that it provides such great poetic lyrics, yet from all these small detours he takes, he manages to build a beautiful picture, a picture of a night palace, of getting old and all that comes from it, of nature and human nature, and of the world that surrounds all that. This album is the only one on this list that could be described as boundless in what it offers. There is so much to enjoy on this album. Every song is a treat. That's why it's my album of the year. Well, what do you guys think? You made it to the end of the video. What's your favorite album from the last year? Are you sad I didn't give Brat any praise? If you are, please leave me alone in the comments below. I'd appreciate it.